In our space, we work in a very hungry space. I think if you're doing your job right, you're only talking to people that are hurting for the problem that you solve. It's tough for me to really have a beat on like the market as in general because I feel like we find the right people at any time of the year or the election cycle. Like we find them and they're like, man, we can't get enough builds out the door because, our testing takes too long. Like we're just stuck in this. Like we hear that all the time, night and day, no matter where. And we can help you solve that.
Hey guys, and welcome to the Grow IT podcast. One of your hosts here, Trey King. And today we are very excited to have our guest, Mr. Jay Aigner from JDAQA. And we'll be diving into his story a little bit today, as well as what it is his company does. And then, as always, some good, engaging insights into the technology industry. So make sure to stick around for this one. But without further ado, Jay, welcome to the Grow IT podcast. Thanks for hopping on, man.
All the way from South Africa to Philadelphia. What a connection, Treg. Thank you for having me on, my friend.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for hopping on. Jay, I think it's good if we maybe kick things off. If you could introduce yourself and just, tell us a bit about your background, a quick snippet or two of your story.
Sure. Yep. So I live in Philadelphia today. Have 6 kids, wonderful wife. We have a dog, very busy household. I think I kind of go from a family first kind of mode as my career. So I own a company called JDAQA. We do software testing. We're a consultancy based out of north of Philadelphia. We have a team of around 60 folks. We have some onshore folks. We have some offshore folks, and basically we help SaaS companies, high growth SaaS companies, custom software development shops with their QA. A lot of the times that's with their automation because it's something they consistently struggle with. But we partner with a lot of the industry standard tool companies, and we have a lot of expertise in that space when it comes to how do we test things. Because a lot of times people just want to make cool stuff. They don't want to learn, figure out how to test it, what browsers, what devices, how do we make sure 100,000 people logging on is not going to blow it up. That sort of thing is not the same thing as building it. So that's where we come in and help these companies.
I was in a good flow when we started now, and when you mentioned 6 kids, I just had that pause, right?
Yes.
Because I've got
Yes.
2, right? I've got 2 boys. And let me tell you, it's a handful. So, 6 kids is respect, brother. That's excellent.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
That's all. That's all.
It's fine.
Yeah, man. It's a blessing. Tell me,
It is.
regarding the industry. I mean, how did you? How did you get into this business sector? Like, what was it that like sparked this initial interest that, obviously made you so passionate about this?
I don't think anybody sets out to be in QA.
Good
Not
point.
anybody that I've met before.
Yeah, me either.
People ask me all the time how you get into it, and I say I don't know. I got into it by being a bad developer. I went to school to make video games and like got my degree in computer science. I just didn't want to be. I love programming. I think it's very awesome. I think it's a cool extension of the human brain and like the connection between a computer and building stuff. All very cool.
Yeah.
But I just didn't like that in the context of like deadlines and having to have something done and like done. I thought of it more of like I don't know. I enjoy the expressive nature of it, I guess, more than like actually doing it for a career. So I got bailed out. I got lucky. I got hired to do testing with my development background. It was certainly helpful to know, why things maybe we're doing things, that other people wouldn't know just from the understanding of like how, programming works.
Yeah.
And so I started a game company doing testing for the old touchscreen bar game company called Megatouch.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
and
Yeah.
it was great. It was awesome. I wanted to be a game designer, and I got to do that there for a little bit. It was fantastic. It was a very fun time. Um, but then, I had more kids, and I realized I couldn't, support a family of 4 plus or whatever it was at the time on $50,000 or whatever I was getting paid as a game designer at Megatouch. So
Sure.
I jumped out to a bunch of different companies after that. I went to big healthcare, hated it. Got into the startup space, loved it. bounced around, did some consulting, and then eventually kind of built this business. And I love running the business as much as I love QA, honestly, at this point.
Yeah.
I love the team that we've built. I love like the problems that we solve. So yeah, it kind of evolved from doing QA to consulting to kind of building this team and then focusing more on how to build the company and grow the company. And while still maintaining this the highest level of quality that I used to do myself, right? I mean, that's kind of where it started, was like me making sure I
Yeah.
cross all the T's and dotted all the I's. I have to make sure that still happens for every single project that we work on, and scale that, right? So that's been the journey so far.
Yeah, that's quite a journey. It's quite a colorful background. Jay, based on your expertise, what are the current market trends, that you've picked up lately? What ways are the winds blowing in your industry?
I think in a services space, especially if you are narrow in your service offering, um,
Yep, like niche, like.
and I think the industry is very wide, and I think for the most part, if you have a niche services industry, you kind of the turbulence doesn't affect you as much. Where the big drought of VC money and all the things that everybody was talking about, the recession, all the stuff last year, we didn't really have that big of a problem because there's so many companies that need what we do that it's like we couldn't get to them all. Even if we had a conversation with them right now, it's like we couldn't possibly serve all those people. So but to to answer your question, I definitely have heard and felt the winds, of uh, recession come and go,
Yeah.
the VC drought thing kind of come and go, and now like money's starting to free up is what I'm hearing. And like again, I don't play in that space. I'm not a VC guy, but as far as just the industry and like software being built and things being invested in, it does feel like, and I think that's 90% of the economy is just like feel, like how everybody feels is like how things are going to happen. So it's optimistic, I think, is from, a new software wave. I'm not even going to touch on AI just because it's like its own monster, but
It's
like in
yeah,
general, software I think is back on, it's going to be back on the rise.
back on track. I think you hit the nail on the head there with optimistic. Um, having obviously, obviously, I have a lot of conversations with our current clientele here, and that on the Grow IT side, and let me tell you that everybody, and it seems like past elections kind of like played a big role to it, I suppose, as well. But for 2025, a lot of people are like, cautiously optimistic. When it comes to, as opposed to how they felt things were from 2024. So I agree with you. I see things are currently a bit on the rise as well. We've got a lot of clients that said they had projects like hanging in the air for quite some time, like the whole year. And 3 days after this election results, they just had greenlit projects. So
Right.
it's interesting how these things can play a role, right?
It is, and I think back to I think it's perception. I thought that the whole time it doesn't really matter who won or whatever. But the perception was that if one person won versus the other, that the economy would do better. So like that's probably what's going to happen because the perception was that was going to happen. He won, and now I'm assuming that that's going to kind of carry into some momentum into 2025. But who knows,
Yeah.
right? We'll see.
Tell me what would your take be on the current market sentiment? Just to maybe latch onto what we just discussed. Is there you think people are making decisions a bit easier and quicker?
Um, Again, in our space, we work in a very hungry space,
Yeah.
and people we I think if you're doing your job right, you're only talking to people that are hurting for the problem that you solve. So
Well said.
it's tough for me to really have a beat on like the market as in general because I feel like we find the right people at any time of the year or the election cycle or the whatever. Like we find them and they're like, man, we can't get enough builds out the door because our our testing takes too long. Like we're just stuck in this. Like we hear that all the time, night and day, no matter where, and we can help you solve that. And it's So for us, it's like, and most of the time that hurts now, right? That's a very much like that is we want to get, from releasing every 12 weeks now because of how crappy our, pipeline is to every two
Yeah.
weeks. That's a, whatever 6x improvement in your output of production builds to, your clients, which is how you make money. So, yeah, I for us, uh I don't know that we were really affected one way or the other about people saying yes, no, or longer or shorter periods of time. It's been if people have the problem and they're hurting and we can solve it, it's been a
Yeah.
pretty straightforward transaction.
I think this might be a good time now that, I mean, you did touch on it earlier, but if you don't mind to explain to the listeners, what is it specifically what your company does?
Yes. So we either do kind of full QA department as a service where, a digital product company who, either makes projects or products for themselves, which is, a
Yeah.
SaaS company, or for somebody else, which is a custom software development shop. We'll come in and basically run the entire quality center for that organization. Um, it is a separate entity. It is integrated with the teams as if they were just working with somebody in the cubicle next to them. Um, but we come in as kind of a third party auditor, and we're not biased. We don't really, we're not gonna come like make you happy because we're not finding about a bunch of bugs. Like we're gonna report what's
Yeah.
happening. We're gonna find the issues, but we're gonna be a great team to work with. So we come in and we'll kind of run full quality assurance to service, which includes like strategy roadmaps. Like here we are. Let's where are we at today? How do we get to that 2 week release cadence that we were talking about? Also, we'll do automation roadmaps. So a lot of these bigger companies,
Oh
you'd be
yeah.
surprised how many billion-dollar organizations still can't figure out test automation. They still have the same problem. We want to get more builds out, but they have 30 teams and they have all these manual testers and they have all these different automation projects they've started and stopped and done. So we can kind of come in and survey that landscape, provide the right tooling, or maybe maybe they have the right tooling. I mean, kind of provide the framework in that tooling to make sure that they're successful in their automation. Again, very metrics driven, very milestone driven, very here's where
Mhm.
we are today. Here's the goal at the end of the rainbow. Like, let's build the steps to get there, and we kind of help those companies do that as well. And then, as every services agency does for the most part, provides some staff augmentation where it's like if a client needs some really good resources, we're not a headhunting firm by any stretch or a staffing firm, but we do keep a really good bench of folks that if people need somebody to come in and do
Go
some
to.
engineering for them, we can do that. So that's kind of the main three things that we do.
Tell me from a value standpoint, right? You've obviously mentioned earlier a lot of things that I could say. There's a lot of value you guys bring to the table, but just from your point of view, right? What would you say is the most significant value what your business bring to other businesses? And maybe it's good if you don't mind just to if you can just obviously not mentioning the client's name, but just an example of how big of a difference in things that you have done for a client or so.
Yeah. Um, we have we've been ground zero for a lot of really fun um, projects and clients where we basically got to be their QA team as they've grown from, I think there was 30 people, one QA person we came in to replace a company called Reversion. Uh,
Yeah.
Shout out to Alex Markov, just an awesome CEO. We were up with them until they were over 200 people when they were acquired.
Wow.
Even after they were acquired, we were still doing their QA for their parent company called Assembly. Um, that was like us being able to relieve that side of things for them so they could continue to grow, like really proved out our model a lot for us. Um, we come into other companies and sometimes do things like performance testing, just to kind of get in the door to some of these bigger firms. So like some of these big benchmark, kind of think of your McKinseys of the world that kind of do these big digital transformation projects. We'll come in and do performance testing on their tooling, which has been pretty impactful because they don't have the expertise. It's a condensed timeline. All these like kind of big corporate goals. So that's two ends of the spectrum, right? It's like from startups, which I think we've matured a little bit now to where we're probably in the 50 to 400 person range, as opposed to like back, when there was only
Yeah.
one QA person and a couple developers.
Yeah.
But that's the range of value we've provided. It's like from startup building out the QA team, just taking that off of the founder and the CTO and the engineers plate, up to enterprise, where like very specific things we can come in, knock out for them. They trust us and they go, hey, by the way, you guys crushed it on this. Can you do these other couple things for us in the testing space that we need help with? So we provide value kind of on a project by project basis in these bigger firms. And then the smaller companies, it's more about like relieving this big pain for them.
Yeah, so it doesn't really matter if it is a situation whereas it's a you mentioned ground zero, from a I don't necessarily want to say startup, but from let's say from a company in a young age, that you're the guys that might drive that functionality for them, or it might be on an enterprise level, whereas you might just latch onto obviously current departments and you fill the need there where they've got some challenges, right?
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Tell me, I would like your opinion on, if we can just step back a bit and not necessarily just on the industry, but in your opinion, I mean, you've been around for quite some time now doing what you're doing. What type of mindset, Jay, would you say is needed to be a successful founder of a company? I know it's a loaded
Uh,
question, but I know.
it's just a
I
great,
love
it
this
is a great
question.
question.
Love
It's a
it.
great one. Um, I mean, because it's just all the boilerplate answers, you've heard
Yeah,
a million times where it's like, tenacity and, vision and like all these different things. I think it's the desire to build your own thing, but not like you have to be able to just, I don't know, you have to have the personality trait of like, it's always going to work. Like, we will find a way to make it work. Like, I'm not, if I try to do that in life too, like, I mean, obviously, like I said, I have a bunch of kids, so like I get stressed out and yell, and I'm like, crazy dad all the time myself. But like for the most part, I try to, that's how I try to operate, uh, my business and my life. So I think that's and I guess noticing when you're off path, because people
yeah,
still like, I see people who have that like, the high motor where they're like, the thing I just said, like, we're gonna make it work, we're gonna make it work, but they're so far off from some of the core fundamental stuff that they're like never gonna really
got it.
take off. And
Like
I
the
see
the,
that
the
so
base.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're like they're driving really hard, but they have no ICP. They have no idea who their customer is. They just know that like I can work with anybody. Like, and that's like cue the tiny violin, like when you hear that, right? That's like uh that means to me that you haven't probably done your homework, which is
mm,
not that laborious really. And it's kind of a fun exercise, like when you really sit down to like make your personas and understand your company types and like do all this stuff where you're like, this is who we help. Like this should be fun data to like coalesce together into these like
yeah.
places. So yeah, I think um the ability to seek help, to know that you're off. I guess I don't really know, how would you know you're off, right? Like I guess like how do people know when they get in
You
that
need
cycle?
some sort of production line to measure against, right? Or that
Right.
mentor, or that somebody, or that system, right? So yeah, I fully agree. That's I've actually had a mate of mine that's is a typical example of what you just said. Now is that a good visionary leader, right? And got these ideas and pumping it and so on. But all of these ideas and all of these changes or plans to break through that glass ceiling, it takes fundamentals that needs to be able to scale, and those things need to be hard in place as well. And but I mean, I'm picking it up with some of our clients as clients, picking it up as well. Whereas from them just to scale, there's got all these good ideas, but they've got these old, like may it be legacy systems in place, or then they just add all these different SaaS, and then you need someone else to integrate all of this, and they build up. So I definitely understand that you need to be like entwined and realistic about where you're wanting to go, what you want to do, and then the base needs to be able to handle that and cope with that, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I mean I don't have an MBA, and I like that I don't have an MBA, just because I can say that. But I I do wonder like how much of it it's education based, right? Like you would think that if somebody you have to have both, right? You have to have the drive, like the ultimate, just like I'll figure it out. Like, yeah, okay, this doesn't work, but like I'll do this thing to make this happen, so this will work. Like, whatever,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
figure it out. But you also have to, at least you have to you have to have enough of that to overcome a lack of education where you're learning as you go, which is how I did it. Or you have to have that plus some formal like understanding of how, operations, sales, and finance all kind of play together as the big
back
three
together.
of your company. So, I'm sure there's some mix of that, and you can kind of figure it out. But I guess you just have to have like a little more stick to itness if you're gonna just muddle your way through the contracts and all the different things you have to learn as a business owner.
Business. Tell me, Jay, where can the listeners get hold of you guys?
JDAQA.com, or check us out on LinkedIn, or check me out on LinkedIn, Jay Aigner, Aigner. And I'm on there with our podcast, The First Customer, all the time. So you'll find me.
Excellent. I need to thank you for hopping on today. I really appreciated your take on different topics. I can fully understand why you guys are so successful. Not just for the value that you bring, but I mean your take on is quite fresh to me on certain topics. And sometimes it is needing to go against the grain or a different narrative on how one sees things, right? So you provided us with some good insight here today. Thanks for hopping on, Jay. This was awesome.
Thanks, Trey. Appreciate you, brother. Have a good one, man.
Same to you. Take it.